What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and this one I wanted to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I want to break down what's happening with the economic calendar going into tomorrow, what's happening with more earnings that are coming out, and what you should be watching for in terms of the charts. But before I break down all this information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I am personally not a financial planner, to take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Weeble link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull and deposit $500, you're guaranteed 20 free stocks. You deposit $25,000 or more, you're guaranteed 75 of them. And the offer ends very soon in just 2 weeks. Anyways, now let's break down what's happening to SPY. Looking at SPY, as of right now, we lost some key support right here in this 502.5 area. Those are a signal that this thing would come all the way down to at least 500. We actually went a little bit below that into the 499s before coming back up. But overall, we're still looking bearish. The trend is still weak, and we have a gap to fill all the way down to 497. So there is a risk of a bit more downside looking at the current trend. So I'm going to break down more details about this in just a few minutes, but I first want to talk about some very important factors which will affect the markets. So for today, we had the Fed Beige Book come out, which showed that a lot of data is not looking that bad in terms of the labor market and other factors like that. The Fed is also talking about how price increases are kind of like moderating a bit. However, with the economic growth that we're seeing and such, things are just looking decent based off the data the Fed was showing us and based off the past. That's like previous data. All of this could change depending on what happens in the future with the whole Israel and Iran situation and other factors like that. So I just wanted to call that out. This doesn't guarantee anything so far. And this data could also be very, very biased. So you want to be very careful. Now, moving forward, tomorrow is going to be Thursday, April 18th, and we have more data coming out that's going to be very important. 1 hour before the market opens, we have initial jobless claims coming out. We want this to be between, 212 and 215,000. Then we have more manufacturing numbers coming out, continuing jobless claims, and more jobs numbers. Then we have the Philly Fed new orders also coming out. That's going to be important for inflation. And that's pretty much it. All this data will affect the market an hour before the market opens. And then after that, we have Bowman and Williams giving their speeches. We have Bostic giving a speech, some bill auctions coming out, and then Bostic giving another speech. So that's pretty much it. We have a bunch of Fed speakers tomorrow, followed by the bill auction coming out, which could cause some volatility in the markets. Okay, and that's pretty much it in terms of our economic data. It's not that crazy, just lots of data coming out in the morning. And besides that, it's just a bunch of Fed speakers. After all of that, we also have some earnings coming out. All the earnings coming out for right now are very minor. I'm not going to really spend time talking about that. I just don't think it's really worth my time right now. But I'm going to be talking more about earnings tomorrow since we have TSMC, not to mention Nokia and a couple of others like that. And then later on, we also have Netflix announcing its earnings tomorrow. So I'll be talking more about all of those tomorrow. And then for Friday, we have like American Express and P&G. Netflix is going to be a big one. So I'll be watching this very carefully tomorrow to see how this affects us. In terms of the market's overall positioning right now, the market is still very fearful. There's still fear that the market is going to see more downside, and many of these funds and institutions are adjusting based off this. Market momentum is slowing down from greedy back to neutral, and we're approaching fear right now as we're getting closer to the 125 daily moving average. Additionally, if you look at other factors such as the puts and call options, they're continuing to push much higher as we're starting to see more and more puts being bought, and we're starting to see shorts piling into the markets as this is leading to more selling and more changes based off sentiment. Also, market volatility is extremely fearful because the VIX is breaking out above its 50 daily moving average, which suggests that the market's on a downtrend and we're seeing more and more weakness. So far, there's no sign that the VIX is rejecting. There's no sign of SPY bouncing yet. The market is still looking weak. Same thing with the indices out there. Now, part of why the market is weak is because of this news right here. So there's a lot of tensions between Israel and Iran, and I just want to say that my job is not to tell you how this all started or anything like that. I'm not going to really do that. Let's just say this: Iran had their retaliatory attacks over the weekend. They launched over 300 missiles at Israel, and Israel managed to deflect slash block and intercept almost all of them. But the issue is, with this happening, now Israel is considering striking back at Iran, and Iran is saying that if they do that, they're going to attack back again with more severity. So the situation is very tense. That's all you need to know. The situation is very, very tense. Once again, I'm not picking sides, saying where this started from. I'm not going to waste time doing that. That's up to you to research, and you could even talk about that in the comments. I just want to say that it's a tense situation and it remains very tense, and that's what's very important for the markets. Now, why is the market dipping because of this? Well, I would say that it's not solely because of what's happening now, but because of what is projected to happen later on. You see, this leads to a lot of consequences, such as more sanctions, more division. It affects trade. It's also going to affect I would say, crude later on. Right now, it's not affecting crude as much, but in the future, it could do so, especially if they start attacking each other back and forth and back and forth. And the more they attack each other, the more they threaten each other, the higher the probability is for this to happen. So for the markets, I would say that the whole Israel-Iran situation is not the sole reason why we're dropping. Remember, in my video, I also mentioned that in Q2, and I said this a couple of weeks ago, I was expecting some downside in the markets. This is based off cyclicals. So our cycles are showing the downside, which has already come. So cycles are one reason. The overall, excuse me, the bonds market, looking at the yields, are playing a big role as well. The dollar breaking out is playing a role. And then we also have the Israel situation, which is used as one of the major catalysts by the markets to do what it's doing. So it's all these different factors combined, which is why the market's dipping. But the Israel situation is a one very, very big factor, of course, because once again, it has more projections to affect crude and the overall economy even more. This could also add to inflationary pressure. If we end up getting more and more of these attacks and it starts affecting crude, that's going to be another big factor. And then if that ends up being the case, it's going to affect the Fed's policies. That is a strong possibility. So we will see how things go for the time being. But now let's just break down these charts. How are things looking, in my personal opinion? Well, we're going to actually zoom out. I'm going to close all of these lines, and I'm just going to do this. I'm going to go to the daily time frame just to show you guys something very important. So on the daily for SPY, you will notice that the trend, the chart is bearish, right? Why is it bearish? We had this high at 525 just less than 3 weeks ago. We came up, came down. We've been making higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, and we're clearly on a downtrend so far. Now, with SPY dipping like this, I just want to call out that we haven't fully filled this gap. Down here is a gap to fill at 497. We could easily fill this gap very soon. And I think that once we fill this gap, we're going to be looking to see where the market tries to base, because we've seen this thing bounce very much in the very, very mid, like 490s many times. So there could be buyers to defend it all the way around there. Right now, buyers are trying to defend 500. We'll see if they can hold it or not. If we lose this, it's going to easily fill this gap below. So make sure you keep this in your mind. The trend is still bearish. We have to fill this gap on SPY. We're not done yet. So there is a risk of more downside. On the QQQ, in my video yesterday, I mentioned that there's likely more downside coming. I was trying to see if we get a little bounce first before we get the downside or not. I mentioned it's very possible we had to get a bounce and drop or just drop from where we currently were. And I called out this 425 area. And then in my intraday videos, I said we're going to likely fill this gap on the QQQ. That is exactly what happened. We filled the gap. So we called this move for tomorrow. We'll see if the QQQ tries to rebound just a little bit, maybe it gaps up a bit, and then we'll see if we get a bearish continuation. There is certainly a risk of it retesting 425 and possibly dropping lower. Our support would be all the way down to about the 422 area. So there is a risk of more downside in the QQQ because of Nvda. Nvidia is looking bearish right now. We have a very, very bearish looking daily candlestick. I think this is a bearish engulfing candle, and we have this gap to fill all the way down at 823, not 523, 823. So if we fill this gap, this is going to drag things down even more. This could come all the way down to this gap, and it could actually approach the lower 800s if we end up losing that support. So I see a risk of downside on this chart as well. Tesla's also in a downtrend, but we're seeing it attempting to base very close to 155. So we'll have to be watching a range on it. So the point I'm trying to make is the fact that the market is still bearish. There's no sign of us bouncing yet. So I want to break down some levels now and then talk about what is very probable in my personal opinion. So moving forward, I just wanted to say that looking at SPY, we have support currently at 500. If we lose 500, it could end up falling all the way down to 497. And there's a very good chance of that happening since we have a big gap to fill, which may act as a magnet. We have our 20 EMA acting as resistance right now in the hourly time frame. That's very close to 503. If we break 503, we could easily start pushing back up to 505, but we have to hold above 503. That's a little bit tricky, so we'll have to see if SPY could do that. In my personal opinion, the most likely possibility is we kind of like gap up and maybe try to retest 503 or so, shuffle a bit, and we eventually start just dipping to 500. And if we lose it, I think 497 could come within the next couple of days. And then we could try to bounce somewhere in the mid 490s. But I think that there is a risk of a bit more downside to start attracting that. If we break past 505, we could turn back to bullish, but we haven't done so yet. And the odds do favor this dipping a bit more. On the QQQ, it's very similar to SPY. We could retest our 20 EMA in that 429 area, but then once we touch this 20 EMA, we could reject. So I wouldn't be surprised if we gap up, kind of retest resistance at 429, then 430, and then we come back down to 427 and starts sinking back down to about like 424 or so, I think there's a risk of more downside since the trend is kind of weak. And I think that Nvidia is going to play a big role in kind of like pushing this down. The trend on the QQQ is bearish as we had this like nice sideways channel that was developing, forming a flag, and ultimately we ended up kind of like falling through it. So that's something worth noting. That was very, very important. With us potentially doing that and with this potentially dropping even more, there's still a more risk of downside. So watch that 425 support. If we lose that, look for a move all the way down to the 423s. I think it may pop a little bit more, gap up and retest 427 to 429, come back in this range for a bit, and eventually start dipping lower. And I think that there's a very good chance of more downside. Why do I say that? It's also because of Nvidia. Nvidia has resistance at the previous support right here at this 852 area. And then if we lose that, you're going to be looking at 834 support, 830, and then 820 below that after it fills this gap. So Nvidia could retest 853 and it could reject. If it gets a big rejection, we're going to be looking for a move all the way down to the gap fill at 823. Nvidia is looking weak. Excuse me, we've got a big rejection. So I see potential for this to start dropping even more. As for Tesla, Tesla is not looking as weak because what I do find interesting is the fact that it's trying to base. So it is trying to base at this level, meaning it's trying to hold 153.8 to 155 as support. We have resistance around 156.75 and 157.5. My guts tells me that with this downtrend on Tesla, it could retest this resistance at 156 and then start sinking. However, to turn bullish, you want to see it break past our 50 EMA 160. If you break 160, we're back to bullish. If we lose 153.8, we're back to bearish, and 152 is coming followed by 150. Then we have a gap fill all the way down in the 140s. So I think that tomorrow we could gap up, retest this resistance, and we'll have to see how this thing reacts to 157. If we reject again, there's going to be a risk of Tesla dropping lower, and we could be looking for 152 all over again. However, Tesla is also trying to base, so it's not going to drop as hard as other stocks out there. We're still seeing buyers defending it at 155 or very close to that range. So I wouldn't be surprised if it kind of pops and drops, comes back down to 152 and then gets bought back up again and trades a little bit sideways, but I do see a risk of downside on the chart. Apple's also looking kind of weak. It's been rejecting off the 20 EMA, the green trend line right here. Notice that it's downtrending as well. It could retest 169.25, shuffle a bit around this area, then reject and start sinking to 167.5. That's a strong possibility simultaneously. So there is also a risk of downside on Apple. It's something that's worth noting. All right, so that is it for the main five I typically go over, as you guys know. Now let's just talk about a couple more. So for Palantir, we're going to bring up the 4-hour time frame. This is a very, very nice time frame to use. We look bearish right now. If you look at the trend, it's been continuing to sink, and I could easily see this test 21 all over again. If that fails, let's watch 20.5. It's not dropping like insanely hard, but I do see a risk of this coming all the way down to about 20.5 all over again. And I see this potentially retesting 21 flat. So look for this to retest 21.6, then start dipping all the way down to the lower 20s. That's a strong possibility. For Supermicro, we have resistance at 980 and 1000. We have support at 950 and 940. If we lose 940, we could easily start sinking all the way down towards lower levels like 900 to fill this imbalance. We're also showing some weakness on the chart, so I wouldn't be surprised if we kind of pop a bit and start dipping again. If we lose 940, that is, we're going to be dipping, so be careful. There is a risk of this dropping with Nvidia. Rivian, we called out a little pop and drop. We kind of popped a bit, then we ended up dropping. I think that there's a risk of this dipping a little bit more. We could be making our way back down towards about 8.5 all over again. Look at resistance at 9 to 9.06. We could retest that, then start rejecting. So look for that very, very carefully. For SoFi is kind of rejecting up to 20 EMA. Could retest this and start dipping all the way down to about 7 flat. So I see a risk of this dropping all the way down to 7. For the IWM Russell 2000, we're hovering below the 20 EMA. We could retest around 195 and then reject and start sinking all the way down towards 190. I still see some downside potential in the Russell 2000, especially because the 4 hour is looking weak and we're approaching this next support zone at 192 to 190. So I think that this might pop a bit and start dipping. We still look a little bit more bearish and I see a little bit more room. AMD is looking a little bit weak. We lost support at 160. Our next target is going to be all the way down here. I'm going to be looking at this previous support becoming resistance at 150.5. So I could be looking for a move down there if we continue to lose 154. So look for a rebound of 156. If we break past 158, we could push higher, but it looks to me like it's going to pop and drop, and we could be looking for 150 very soon. ARM got some bad news that came out from the CEO about their chips. So, with that happening, the share price is looking bearish, and we're going to be looking for a move all the way down to lower levels. I wouldn't be surprised if this continues to sink all the way down towards 100. If that fails us, we could be falling all the way down towards 91. So I'm looking for more downside. I think this could continue to sink. It looks very weak right now. Be prepared for that. That is my warning for everyone. Coinbase was trying to rebound. This ended up failing. We have a nice looking structure right here. Could retest 220, then reject and start sinking lower. So I see some more risk in this. And also, don't forget about this zone right here. We have a nice chop zone around 194 to 200. That's going to be our next target if we end up losing 206. So look for a test of just under 220, the 200 EMA, a rejection, and move back down to 206 and eventually 200. That's a strong possibility. For Amazon, we're on a bit of a downtrend right now. We're looking kind of weak. I do see a risk of this potentially testing this low right here at 180 again. Could test 182 and then start dipping down to 180. And then we'll have to see how well it holds around that 178 to 180 area. Could be revisiting that area real quick. For Meta, we're on a bit of a downtrend. It looks to me like we've kind of rejected off this support we were trying to hold. Could retest 497, then reject and start sticking to 485. I see that as a strong possibility. For Microsoft, we're on a bit of a downtrend as well. Going to be looking for a test of 413.5, then a rejection, and move all the way down towards this zone right here, 409, and then eventually 406. So I see those as risks. For Google, we're stuck between supply and demand. I am seeing some potential in this as it's trying to turn right here, but look at resistance at 157.24 and support at 155.98. If we break past 157.24, it's going to push higher towards about 158.5. If we lose 155.98, we're going to be sinking all the way down towards 155, then eventually 153. My guts tells me it might actually kind of remain sideways for now. It's been stuck in this range, so I'm going to be watching it very carefully, which way it breaks. It's trying to push higher, so there is a potential in it to get back up to 158 and outperform the market. But just to be safe, we'll have to wait and see if we get rejection or not, depending on news. The VIX has been uptrending. It came down to its 20 EMA in the 17s and bounced again. If we continue to push, we could be going all the way up to 19 again. Still bullish overall, which is bearish for the stock market. The VIX is on a breakout still, so just be a little bit careful with it. This is still looking strong. The 10-year treasury yield is coming down a bit, might retest 4.518. We could come down a little bit and then try to rebound a bit. We're still on a very, very strong uptrend. There's no sign of this breaking down yet, so we'll have to see how it reacts to the support at 4.5. We're going to likely test that, and we'll see how it goes. The dollar, it's at this resistance right over here at 106. We'll see if it holds this or not. It's kind of rejecting a little bit, so there is a risk of it dipping a little bit. Could this mean that the market's going to bounce? Well, it really depends on if we get a follow-through move. But today the dollar dipped a little bit, and yet the market continued to fall, so it's not going to guarantee anything. I do see a risk of this dipping more since we're below 106, so I'll just have to wait and see how things go. With that being said, guys, thank you all so much for listening. Let me just make it clear the market is still looking weak. There's no sign of a bounce yet. For SPY to turn bullish, you want to break 505. To be bearish, you want to see it lose 500. There's a risk of it losing the support and coming all the way down to at least 497, looking at the gap fill. So that's a strong possibility. For those who are interested, make sure you watch your levels very clearly and do what's necessary for the charts. I just want to thank you all for listening one more time. Just know that the market's going through a lot of tension right now, so we have to be patient and give the market the time it needs. All right, so have a great day, guys. I'll see you guys very soon on the next one tomorrow morning before the market opens, and peace out.